What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the TCG Empire YouTube channel. Today we are taking a look at Lost Box Charizard EX. Now, this is a new mechanic that has been showcased and popping up, and I have to say that this aspect of playing the deck is a ton of fun. Basically, what you do is you have the ability to use Charizard EX with the internal rain once during your turn. When you evolve it, I'm sorry, not once per turn, but when you evolve it, you search for 3 basic fire energy, and it allows you to attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. And then Burning Darkness does 180 plus 30 more for each prize card your opponent has taken. So you basically play this deck in the sense that you use the Lost Zone engine that we talked about before on, I believe, Monday's video. Use Comfey with flower selecting, and then you eventually lead into Sableye to use that Lost Mine, or you use Cramorant, which gives you the ability to use Spit Innocently for 110 for no energy. And it means that you get to add damage onto the board and actually finish with Charizard and punish your opponent for knocking out your attackers. So Charizard EX having 330 HP, it is very awkward for your opponent to, get to, and it has a built-in mana fee prevention to where your opponent can't deal damage to it, which means if you don't get mana fee down but you have Charizard EX out, your opponent can't select it with something like Greninja. With that, we're also running 3 rare candies so that way we can make sure that we get those Charizards out as consistently as possible. We are running the 4 of Colress Experiment just so that way we can feel our Lost Zone. And the neat thing about this deck is if Charizard EX is not at its full potential, you can hit 480 to 240 damage if your opponent's taken some prizes, and then you can actually clean up with Sableye. So providing your opponent has taken 3 prizes, you're going to be hitting 270, which means that you can do a clean up with something like Sableye. So it's super solid. As always, the deck list will be posted right here so you guys have a full clean view, as well as be in the description so you guys can copy and paste. With that being said, though, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. If you did enjoy it, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe, turn on post notifications, share it with a friend if you found it interesting. And with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the gameplay. Later. Alrighty. Let's get right into playing Lost Box Sablezard, or Lost Box Charizard. It's not really Sablezard because you're not playing the Radiant Charizard, so I think Lost Charizard EX. I don't know. It's a little bit awkward to try and figure out, but it's not the end of the world. So my opponent is going first, so hopefully we can pull off something like the turn 1 Colress. And looking at this hand, it actually might be possible. We're going to start the Comfey, and we are playing against Lost Box ourselves, so we're going to have to see exactly what we can do. My opponent is going to be able to use that Star Requiem if they are playing the Giratina V-Star, so that's something we're going to have to keep in mind. But looking at this start, this is a phenomenal hand to start with. We have a way to retreat. We have 2 battle VIP passes, so definitely not looking too bad. Now, if we can top deck something like a switch cart to save the energy in order to use it off of something like the Radiant Greninja, it'll be perfect. But we'll just have to see. We're definitely going to utilize these battle VIP passes, though. And we for sure, so that way my opponent can't do something turn 2 like use that Radiant Greninja and Moonlight Shuriken. We are definitely going to have to try and get the mana fee down. So going for the draw, we get a water energy, which means we do have access to setting up the board how we want to. So we'll grab a mana fee and a Comfey, and then we will also grab a we'll grab the Cramorant and the Greninja, and then we can bench the Charizard. I just want to make sure that we're able to do what we need. I'm going to flower selecting here first. The Psychic Energy, I don't really need the Lost Mine particularly just yet, so I'm not too worried about that. We'll bench down the Charmander, use the concealed cards, discarding that Water Energy, and we hit Jet Energy as well as Sableye, so not too much that we're going to be able to do right here, but we can use this other Comfey. Question is, can we hit a Colress, making life a lot easier? And the answer is yes. Now we do have to get rid of 1 rare candy, which is really awkward. Hopefully we do have access to some more, but we do get a Cramorant off, which is perfect. We'll grab the Psychic. I don't need the Fire because I know for sure that I have some Fires. We'll grab the Colress so we have something for next turn. And then we can also grab the... I can go Escape Rope or I can go Comfey. How many am I at? I only need to get to 7, and right now we're at 4, which means that the next Comfey will be 5, and then Colress puts us to 7. So we're still in a good spot, and we have the Spit Innocently. And if we actually set it up correctly, we can utilize the Radiant Greninja and actually take some prizes on my opponent's Comfey and start going from there. So I don't hate our outs. I don't hate, what we're going up into. We are only going to have one Charizard set up potentially, so it will be a bit awkward. But again, the Crayman's probably going to get knocked out, which means that I can bench the other Charmander and start getting things ready. But I do need to be wary of my opponent and Lost Mine. So definitely want to make sure that I can get this other Charizard out and go from there. So my opponent going ham. They're going to have 6 in the Lost Zone. Getting rid of a Colress, a basic Psychic, Mirage Gate, and a Super Rod, as well as getting rid of another Mirage Gate. So my opponent is already down 2 Mirage Gates. I'm going to assume that they have a couple in hand. So we're definitely going to be able to set up for something potentially clean next turn, being able to get rid of those Comfeys to put my opponent back a little bit. So there is the Sableye going down. My opponent is going to be able to use that Spit Innocently. Hitting us for 110 damage, and now it comes down to if we have the ability to kind of clean up my opponent's board here. So there is the Comfey. So the first thing we'll do is use the Flower Selecting. Flower Selecting going to grab us the Switch Cart, which is perfect. Next we'll use the Colress just so we can see quite a few more cards. I don't think I'm going to need the Hisuian Heavy Ball. I don't need the Artisan or the Charmander. I'll grab the Heavy Ball anyways just so I can check my prizes before I do any special type of searching. So we do have another Cramorant, and we don't have a... what is it? We don't have a Rare Candy prize, so we still have access to Rare Candy, which is perfect. Which means... Let's see. I can do the Greninja play now. That way I can try to set up on my opponent. So we'll use that Radiant Greninja, getting rid of the Fire Energy because we do have the Super Rod. We do get Switch Cart again. So we can Switch Cart into the Comfey. Use that Flower Selecting, giving us the Charizard and the Escape Rope. Now, considering we do have a Charizard in hand and the prizes, I feel comfortable just grabbing the Escape Rope. And then what we can do is actually set up in order to KO both of the Comfeys, putting us at 3. And then if my opponent takes any more prize cards, we're in a good spot. The only thing that I need to be worried about is the fact that my opponent does have access to that pesky Sableye. So we might actually have to go for a Sableye here. Let's see. My opponent is at 6. Colress would put them at 8. I think what we're going to do right now... Oh, this is awkward. We're going to bench the Cramorant. And then we'll go with the Beach Court. Attach the water to the Greninja. Is there anything else that I need to do? We can shuffle back the energy just to be safe, making sure that there is at least one water, so we can put back the Cramorant. And then we have the ability to use the Mirage Gate, getting a water and a fire. Means we can power up this Radiant Greninja. Go into the switch, use the Moonlight Shuriken, and now we can actually go 90 into... I'm going to get rid of the Comfeys because having Greninja active, my opponent is going to be forced to deal with the Greninja unless they want to get Moonlight Shuriken again. So we can get rid of the water as well as the fire and then start making some plays happen. So we get a fire energy And then we also get a Colress experiment. So Colress will let us thin the deck some more. And then we can potentially start to, set up the Charizard. We want to make sure that the Charizard does have the ability to one-shot a Giratina. So before we evolve or do anything like that, it's going to be important that we make sure that the prizes add up. And my opponent needs to take at least 4 prizes, because we do 180 plus 30, so that'd be exactly 300 damage, KOing the Giratina V-Star. So, and right now we're only hitting for 210, so making this a 1-prize game as much as we can on my opponent's end is going to be perfect for us. So there is another Sableye going down. There is the Mirage Gate, so my opponent is at 8 right now. They can use something like the Lost Mine if they do have a way to get rid of something like the Beach Court per se. But then we have the ability to take 2 prizes, and then all we need is a boss's orders in order to take the last prize on a Radiant Greninja. So my opponent going for the Switch Cart, and if they have the Lost Vacuum, they will be able to use that Lost Mine. And they're already down 3 Mirage Gates, which is pretty awkward. And I'm not sure if my opponent realizes or not that they don't have 10 in the Lost Zone. So, providing we can find something like a Super Rod, we're in a very good spot in order to take a knockout. So there is the Manaphy coming down. We do have access to Spit Innocently if we choose to. Means that we can Spit Innocently, go to 2 prizes, and then try to set up another Charizard. Now, if my opponent runs into a situation where they just decide to pass, which is perfectly fine with me, so we do get the Colress experiment. So let's see what we can do now. We'll use the Colress experiments, grabbing us the boss's orders, the Mirage Gate, and we'll also grab one of the fire energies just so that way we can start to potentially power up any of our board. And then what we can do is we can, let's see, I could escape rope. And then whatever my opponent brings up, we can potentially KO. But I don't want my opponent to bring up something like the Giratina or the Radiant Greninja. So what we're going to do here is just use the Switch Cart. We'll promote the Cramorant. And we do have boss's orders for next turn. So if my opponent takes some prizes, we should be okay. And thankfully too, with my opponent having Sableye, my opponent can KO a Charmander and then put 60 damage on something like a Comfey, but I don't think that it's going to benefit my opponent enough to realistically do it. So, and we still have a rare candy or 2 in the deck, so I don't absolutely, hate what's going on. I just need to make sure that we're playing the 1 prize race as my opponent starts to set up some more. And unfortunately, with having the fires in hand, I should have attached for turn. That would have been something smart to do. But my opponent does have the ability to use that Lost Mine now, so we're not actually losing out on energy, which is good. So now it really just comes down to making sure that we can try and set up the game state and board state that we need. So my opponent is going with the Colress experiment. This is going to put them at 10. And thankfully, we actually have access to Lost Mine, which means that we can put my opponent in an even more awkward spot than they are already in, because we are ahead by 3 prizes, so we have quite a few turns to burn. So here we'll just promote the Comfey, and if we can hit a rare candy, we'll be in a super solid spot. We do gain access to removing that path to the peak as well. So the first thing we'll do is the flower selecting. We will grab the fire energy just because it seems like that's all we're going to be drawing lately. We will attach. I should have bench Sableye and gone for an attach that way, but it's not the end of the world. We can use the Colress experiment, getting us these 3, the Mirage Gate, Switch, and the rare candy. And now we can actually start to set up how we would like to. I'm going to bump the Path to the Peak, use the Artisan just to see what is in deck. We do have access to Cramorant as well. And we do have a Water as well as a Fire energy. So, I don't actually hate how this goes. So what we can do here is use the Rare Candy, go into the Charizard. We can use the ability in order to accelerate. Now, no matter what my opponent switches into, we should be good to go. Trying to see if there's anything else that we need to do. I don't think there is. I think we can just safely use the switch card into Cramorant. And then we can use the Radiant Greninja in order to just thin our hand a little bit. We can get rid of one of those fire energy, drawing us two. Just so that way if my opponent plays something like a Roxanne, there's one less card that we have to worry about. We'll use that Spit innocently. 110, and now my opponent's in somewhat of a checkmate position. So, as long as we find a way to get Sableye and a Psychic energy, we should be good for the next turn. And if my opponent decides to use something like that Roxanne, we're in a super solid spot. Sableye gets the kill. We also have the ability to use Boss's Orders and take a KO that way, so there is the Lumineon. So my opponent most likely going to go for an Iono or a Roxanne. And there is the Boss's Orders. So my opponent is going to be able to Star Requiem, which means that there is the supporter for turn. And then we do have the Boss's Orders for the Cramorant in order to KO and take our last prize card. So that's how we're going to map it out. Just waiting for my opponent to see exactly what type of sequencing they choose to go for. And the Mirage Gate only grabs them a Grass energy. So they're in an awkward spot. They are down 4 Psychic energy. So not too good for them. They have 3 Psychics, or 2 Psychics plus 3. And then there is one here. So my opponent going for the Boss's Orders, bringing up the Greninja that does have an energy on it, and we are safe to take a knockout next turn. So my opponent going to just pretty much give us the win, as we can just retreat and then use the Charizard with Burning Darkness to take our last prize card. So my opponent looking to spread all of the damage that they can. Not going to be able to do much, and then we just have the retreat and the ability to KO. So we can just retreat, bring up the Charizard, and from here use the Burning Darkness for weakness, hitting 540 damage. So looking pretty good. Taking our last prize card and it being a Hisuian Heavy Ball. So that was game 1, guys. Went pretty solid, so let's see exactly what we can do and try and get into a game number 2. Alrighty, guys, getting into a game number 2 here. Hopefully we can pull off the Charizard play in order to take some big knockouts. My opponent rocking that Empoleon coin, so hopefully they're not playing something that can shut off our abilities. If they start with an Empoleon, we just kind of lose, so my opponent loses the coin flip. We will go first, and we are playing against Promise 80868B2. So, looking at our start here, a phenomenal start as far as the Comfeys go. Sadly, we don't have a way to switch or retreat, but it's not the end of the world. And we are playing against Chin Pao. So, the first thing we'll do is use that Comfey. Comfey is going to get us the Artisan. I'm okay with getting rid of a Water. I do have to be weary of the ability that my opponent has with being able to swing with something like the Greninja. So we'll switch into the other Comfey here. Going for that Flower Selecting, grabbing us a Water or a Super Rod. We'll go for the Water here. Use that Hisuian Heavy Ball. Charmander. Not too many other cards. Thankfully, useless Battle VIP passes our prize, so Not too much with that. And then we do have access to Artisan, which will let us see another Comfey. So we can go Comfey, and then we can attach Retreat. Start looking at some more cards in order to fuel our Lost Zone, and we get a Charizard as well as a rare candy. Having access to the Charizard is going to be big for us, as we can search for an energy to retreat and also play the rare candy. So I don't actually hate that. And what we're going to do here is just go for the pass, and then next turn see what we can do. My opponent's not going to be able to take any type of knockout this turn, so everything that we have should be pretty good. And if my opponent has to blow up a Chimpao in order to, you know, benefit from Charizard, if they only get one Frigibax out or Baxcalibur, we actually do have the chance to boss it. So I don't hate our chances. And the minute my opponent goes to 3, then we gain the ability to use Charizard. So I'm sorry, we get the ability to use Roxanne. My opponent searching out a Frigibax, Radiant Greninja, Chinpao, everything, and the Sun. So, if my opponent retreats the Frigibax, that's fine. I don't really hate our chances here, because even though technically speaking we don't have a supporter to play, what we do have is the ability for us to set up a Charizard retreat, and we actually could go for a Cramorant play in order to spit innocently if my opponent decides to not retreat the Frigibax. So there is the Baxcalibur. Unfortunately, not going to be able to fully benefit off of the Baxcalibur just yet, because it is my opponent's first turn. If my opponent had the old rare candy rules, it would be in a solid spot. So top deck, we do get Artisan, so we'll start things off with the flower selecting. Grabbing us the water energy, and it seems like now is probably going to be the best time for us to rare candy, so we can rare candy into the Charizard, use that internal rain, grabbing us the 3 fire energy. And what I'm going to do now is attach 1 to the Comfey and then 2 to the Charizard. And we do have 4 in the Lost Zone, which means now I can attach, retreat, go into the Cramorant, and use that spit innocently, and put my opponent in a very awkward spot, in the sense of, now if they want to try and KO this Charizard, they need Boss's Order, which means that they can't play Irida. And if my opponent goes for something like a Greninja play to take 2 prizes, then Charizard can easily KO the Chinpao, as we would be hitting for 220 damage. 240. My opponent Artisans for the Bidoof. And there's the rare candy into the Baxcalibur. So if we can get something like a Boss's Order to KO the Baxcalibur, KO it with the Charizard, we'll be in a good spot. My opponent using the Super Cold, attaching 2 to the Chinpao. And there's a Professor's Research, getting rid of a Palkia and a Battle VIP Pass. So, our next turn is going to be top deck dependent, but it's not the end of the world. There's Town Soar, where once during each player's turn, they may search their deck for a Pokemon tool. And my opponent grabs that, what is this? I forget the name, Bravery Charm. So, giving themselves some extra HP, it is going to be nice, but it definitely isn't something that they have to worry about too much. So my opponent benching another Chinpao. And now it's going to come all down to if we can hit off of the Comfey or not, in order to set up a KO on the Baxcalibur. So we'll promote the Comfey. Draw for turn. We do get a Psychic Energy. I don't believe that there's any tools in the deck that we can grab, so there's no need to worry about that. We only have one boss's orders, so it's going to be a little bit awkward, but we can use that flower selecting, hopefully hitting it, and we hit Roxanne's switch cart, which means now what we can do is retreat, go into this Comfey, use the flower selecting, getting Colress or Mirage Gate. I'll go for the Colress just in case we have a supporter that we can't play. I already manually retreated. I think we're going to switch cart into this Comfey, use the flower selecting again, grabbing us the jet energy or the fire. I'll save the fire. We'll just have the jet energy down. And then we can use that artisan. Artisan will allow us to grab Manaphy, which means we can block my opponent from potentially using the Radiant Greninja. And now we can go into Colress, grabbing us the Charizard, so we have a Charizard for next turn. And we also have the boss's orders for next turn. The only issue is that I am down some fire energy, and I'm going to have to get rid of one anyways. But it's not the end of the world. I think what I can do is actually save the switch cart and grab the fire energy, because then it gives me something to possibly discard as well. So I don't hate that. And then next turn we do have the KO on the Baxcalibur, providing that my opponent does not try and set up. Let's see. I think I'm just going to pass here. This is going to force my opponent to find a boss's orders. And if they don't, then we have the ability to start KOing Chin-Pows, and it's going to be a lot easier for us to potentially win this game. And the nice thing about Comfey is my opponent does have to discard 2 energy in order to benefit off of it. And if my opponent KOs this Charizard, it opens up the ability to use Roxanne. Now, if my opponent doesn't bench another Frigibax, I am actually going to just KO the Baxcalibur. That way I put my opponent behind. And as we saw here, they did get rid of a Palkia already, so they don't have access to Super Rod. We can just benefit off of everything. So there is the Worker, and there is the Palkia. Again, my opponent is going to have to discard a good amount of cards in order to set up, and so if my opponent is smart, he'll try to set up the board to where damage will be negligible, to where they KO the Comfey, that they have the energy on board with Palkia for next turn if they hit Super Rod plus a way to retreat. Because if my opponent comes here and hits for enough, they need to have at least 3 extra energy. So my opponent just going for the Hellblade, discarding all of the energy. So now what we can do is actually start setting up our board. That way we're in a good position. We do have access to that Nest Ball as well, so we'll Rare Candy into the Charizard, use that Internal Flame, grabbing us the 1 Fire Energy, which we can attach to this Charizard, as well as this Charizard, and now we can start to set my opponent back. How many are in the Lost Zone? We have 9 in the Lost Zone, so a pivot off of something like the Comfey next turn means that we gain the ability to use Lost Mine, which means that what we can do now is bench the Sableye just so we have access to it. And then we can use the boss's orders on the Baxcalibur, putting my opponent to no consistency aspects, and then not having a way to flood the board with enough energy to actually set up another knockout. So if my opponent takes a knockout here on something like a Comfey, a Manaphy, really anything, we gain the ability to use Charizard EX and actually hit for 270. So I don't hate any of this, actually. The only awkward thing is that we don't have a way to knock this Chin-Pow out if they attack and don't KO us, but we can hit for enough to where we can actually possibly use something like a Lost Vacuum, deal enough damage to where Lost Vacuum will KO, and then we can use Sableye. So I don't hate the way that this is going. So my opponent's going for the superior energy retrieval, evolving into the Palkia V-Star, and looking at my lost zone, there are 2 Mirage Gates gone, unfortunately, but we still do have 2, so I don't think it's going to be too awkward for us. We just need to make sure that we can do the math right. So my opponent going for the attach. They are going to be able to hit 240 damage. Using the concealed cards to draw. So there is the Bibarel. So we do have a guaranteed knockout on the Bibarel with something like Sableye, so we'll have to figure it out. So my opponent going for the Hailblade, hitting for 240, and I think I'm safe to just stay in this Charizard. I don't think it's going to be too detrimental for us to do that, and we can hit for enough to where, as I said before, we can actually try and set up some math with Sableye. So we'll use that Colress's Experiment, grabbing the other one, Escape Rope, and then Beach Court. And then what we gain the ability to do is next turn we do have the ability to use the Sableye, which means we are in a fantastic spot. So what we're going to do here is just use that Burning Darkness for 240, and then we'll start to set up some math with everything else. Now, if my opponent has something like a Melanie, they could attach in Melanie, but they do need to find a card like Switch, and I don't think that they're going to be able to really do anything in that sense. So Lost Vacuum definitely would be something nice to have, although I don't think the list includes it, so it is going to be very awkward. But if my opponent ends up actually not attacking this turn, we gain the ability to Sableye, which means we can put the rest here, and then we can just set up some prizes in the back. So not looking too bad on our end. And I'm really liking what this deck can do. So there is the Irida. My opponent benches something like the Frigibax. We are going to just Escape Rope into Sableye. And then we can KO the Chimpao as well as a Frigibax. And then possibly use Sableye in order to set up the final math and knockout on Bibarel. So my opponent not looking too hot with what they're going to do. They just decide to pass, which is perfectly fine with me. This just means that what we can do now is take the knockout, and then if my opponent takes the knockout on this Charizard will be hitting enough to KO anything on the board. So my opponent concedes, realizing that, and with that, that is it for today's video. I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. If you did enjoy it, do me a favor, smash the like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications. And with that being said, thank you for all the support, and I will catch you guys in tomorrow's video. Later.